As you all know, I'm a believer in Shakespeare's words, "Who for one small grape would the entire vine destroy?" Because I've seen many a business forsake their conviction based on the potential promise of some sweet deal. I've seen countless individuals who ultimately undermine their future success by abandoning their conviction in the moment for one small grape. No matter how great that grape may be, no matter how prized it may become, would you really give up the whole vine? And yet we have some, as we're watching play out, who not only would destroy the vine, they'll burn down the whole vineyard for one small grape. A lot of this lack of courage and conviction in leadership always takes me back to that well-known scene in A Man for All Seasons, when Sir Thomas More delivers what to me is one of the most powerful and poignant lines of all time. As you recall, More has been betrayed by Richard Rich, who, after falsely testifying against More, was rewarded. He was rewarding for falsely testifying by being made Attorney General for Wales. And Sir Thomas More confronts his betrayer and says, "Why, Richard, it profits a man nothing to give his soul for the whole world. But for Wales? But for Wales?" I think that is the ultimate question. We ought to be asking that every day of those who are willing to sell their soul for political power or for fame or for fortune of any kind. To what end? That's the question. What's the great prize at the end of that backroom deal? What's the big prize in taking things under, taking bribes or influence peddling? To me, we have to get back to this idea of leaders with courage, not cowardice. Those who will reject the benefits of the cronyist privilege in order to achieve the better outcome. For who? For the hardworking and often forgotten Americans, because that's what this country desperately needs. We have to get back to that. And the fact that we have to go back to 1902 to William George Jordan to just see how this all plays out. This is about truth. This is about a commitment to truth and character. And who's willing to sell out? Who's willing to trim their sails to catch every puff of wind of popularity just so they can win an election? Who's willing to sell out the people who elected them to office for some donations from a big foreign money backer? Who's willing to do those things? And who's willing to do the small things? It's not just these big things that come out in the news. We also have to look at what are the little things? What are the little things that all of us have to look at in the context of our character? And who for one small grape would the entire vine destroy? Or would we give up all of that for Wales? Or for money or for fame? For temporary posturing or positioning? Who would do it for that? And that's the question we have to get back to. And whether it's a big-name politician's fall from grace, and it's usually not a fall, it's usually a sprint and a jump of their own doing and their own making. But then we have to have our own look in the mirror moment to see where our character is and where we actually stand. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. In a big election year like this,
Trump called for a grand jury to investigate.
News happens fast.
Harris said she wants an assault weapons ban.
A significant paradigm shift for the Secret Service.
On the way to work, searching for lunch, or heading home, come here to catch up. We have you covered in the car at 102.7 FM.
Do you have chirping smoke detectors? What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Wilson with Any Hour Services, and if you've ever experienced chirping smoke detectors, you already know how annoying it can be. A great first step to try and stop the chirping is to change the batteries. If the chirping continues, it's possible that your smoke detector has gone bad. As a matter of fact, a lot of people don't even realize that manufacturers recommend replacing the smoke detector altogether after 10 years. If you remove the smoke detector from the wall, on the back you should find a date of when it was made. Do a little math and you'll know how old it is. Now, Any Hour Services knows being a homeowner means you've got a list a mile long of things to do around the house, and check my electrical system probably isn't one of them. That's why we've put together this radio special for any homeowners listening. One of our licensed electricians will perform a comprehensive inspection of your electrical system that includes testing those smoke detectors and give you a full written report for only $29. But you have to mention this ad when you call. Call Any Hour Services to schedule at 801-443-7300. 801-443-7300. Any Hour Services.
Progressive presents Renters MVP's Most Valuable Possessions. Today's MVP, Emily Neal's 70-inch TV. Because after watching her second-grade students yell at each other for hours, there's nothing Emily enjoys more than watching super-rich housewives also yell at each other. Why? Because those women are not her responsibility. And that's why her TV is today's MVP. Keep your most valuable possessions protected by bundling your renters and auto insurance with Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company affiliates and other insurers not available in all states.
Tommy! I can't wait for golf this weekend, huh, buddy? Time flies. Love you, man. Oh, don't forget your knee brace again. We aren't in college anymore.
Moments together matter, so help protect yourself from RSV. If you're 75 or older or 60 plus with a chronic condition like asthma, COPD, heart disease, or severe diabetes, you're at higher risk of landing in the hospital from RSV, and there are no prescription RSV treatments. Check eligibility and schedule your RSV vaccine at vaxassist.com. Sponsored by Pfizer.
Let me ask you a question. You have a best friend? How big would it shock you if somebody told you that your best friend just killed somebody?
911, what's your emergency?
Someone on the other line said they kidnapped my son, and they're demanding $500,000.
On September 12th, 1995, 12-year-old McKay Everett disappeared from his home in Conroe, Texas. It was a crime that shocked the community because the suspect was so unlikely, so unexpected.
Former high-ranking police official. He'd run for sheriff at one point.
Law enforcement personnel were pretty much split down the middle over whether or not he actually did this.
And to this day, McKay's mother, Paulette, still feels that justice was never truly served.
I've asked myself so many times, what in the world happened?
Ransom is available now. Listen at ransompodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you within 5 years of filing for Social Security? Get this. 96% of Americans forfeit an average of $111,000 in Social Security income. And it's all because they filed for their benefits at the wrong time. Learn how you could avoid this with a free, customized Social Security analysis from Boss Retirement Solutions, 5-time winners of the Best of State Award. If you've saved more than $200,000 for retirement and have not filed for Social Security, schedule your free analysis now by calling 801-896-9622. You know, for some people, filing for Social Security early could result in more net income in retirement. Discover how you could get the most income from Social Security. Call 801-896-9622. 801-896-9622.
Advisory services offered through Boss Retirement Advisors, an SEC-registered investment advisory firm. Insurance products and services offered through Boss Retirement Solutions.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, Hurricane Helene is now a Category 3 storm moving toward the Florida Panhandle. Second, the Utah Supreme Court ruled against Amendment D, which would have allowed the legislature to repeal or change ballot initiatives. And third, Google's getting fed up with phony reviews for businesses on Google Maps. 88 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Well, kids today, of course, are being raised with a greater level of exposure to the digital world than anyone ever experienced. It's created a need for a new education strategy. And studies have found how to better teach our younger generation, but there's something beneath the surface and beyond those headlines that I think is worth really digging into. And while we think that because they are digitally native and they're so computer savvy that they get it, well, guess what? We better think again about what we think we know. Kids are struggling when it comes to some of the things online that some of us older adults are struggling with as well. As we often do, we turn to Rick Hess, Senior Fellow and Director of Education Policy Studies at the American Enterprise Institute, to help us navigate how these digital natives are still having some struggle with some things that are pretty important in terms of digital literacy and misinformation. And Rick, welcome back to the show.
Thanks. Good to be with you.
All right, so kind of walk us through this a little bit in terms of, we always think, oh, the kids get it and they understand, what digital literacy is all about and what misinformation is. And it turns out that as exposed as they are to all of this, they're just as susceptible as the rest of us. Explain that.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty obvious if you think about it for a minute. I mean, folks under the age of 18 are much better than us at knowing how to navigate around a screen or knowing how to catch up with the latest, whatever the newest craze is on social media. But that doesn't mean they actually know how to tell what's true or false. It doesn't mean they have any context. It doesn't mean they know what they're doing. And so we can appreciate that they are good at flipping through screens, but we should at the same time understand that doesn't mean they know what the heck they're doing when they're looking at the screen.
I think that's so important to just realize. I always just assume they know everything because they can navigate to places and spaces I can never get to, or where I save that file that I can no longer find on my screen. But talk to us a little bit in terms of some of the studies. I know you had some conversation with Sam Weinberg in terms of some of the things that are happening, and just kind of give us a little lay of the land in terms of what young people are experiencing online and what we really need to start helping train them on so that they can't just exist as a digital native, but they can actually know how to navigate well.
Yeah, you're right. So I was interviewing Sam Weinberg for Education Week. Sam's a neat case. He's a guy who is a professor of social studies and such at Stanford University, and he started digging into this. And he realized that one of the problems is just like, when listeners read fact checkers, they've got a whole lot of questions. How do they know these fact checkers are actually being fair? How do these guys know what they're doing? Why do they seem to say that some things are false when they are apparently true, like the Wuhan lab leak theory? And so what's going on with kids is they just don't know how do you judge the credibility of a video or of a link or a post. So when they come on something on TikTok, they have no tools for figuring out whether they're looking at Iranian propaganda about the Middle East or whether this TikTok video from some guy's basement is actually smart, balanced, and informed. When students are being led to sites that tell them these are the facts about police shootings, they don't know how to check out the legitimacy of the site. They don't know how to check out where these numbers came from. They don't think to follow the links to gauge the credibility of the supposed experts. And so one of the things Sam talks about is how important it is that educators in schools and also parents figure out how to help the kids judge what's credible and not just be impressed that the kids, again, know how to work their way around the device.
Yeah, I think that's so vital. One of the things you pointed out in that conversation with Sam was that 82% of middle school students couldn't tell the difference between an ad and a news story, let alone propaganda and a news story. So that's a little disconcerting there. And so how do we start to have that kind of conversation, again, in schools with parents to make sure that the kids understand, how to kind of do the vertical and horizontal check in terms of credibility and sourcing and where that comes from, as well as kind of the left to right balance as well. How do we start having a different conversation to really arm kids with these kind of tools and navigation abilities?
Yeah, I think the first place to start is just to start. This needs to be something that the teachers are actually explaining to kids, that they're actually making a point to say, hey, how do we know whether this one makes sense or not? How do you judge it? It's a great conversation for parents to have with their kids when their kids are telling them about something they saw on TikTok or something that went viral. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that we've got to understand that a lot of the tools that us, old out-of-touch types got used to, was it published by a real newspaper or magazine? who is this person who wrote it? That a lot of these cues that we used to rely on aren't nearly as intuitive on an internet world where people are throwing up screeds and shooting high quality videos and you don't know who they are or where they come from. Their videos just showing up in your feed due to the algorithm. And part of that is an older generation of folks had learned that you were supposed to go, cross-check a fact, that you could go to the encyclopedia, that you could, go to permanent resources or see if this matched what showed up in your daily newspaper. For a lot of folks under 18, they have no idea what an encyclopedia is. They have no idea what a daily newspaper is. And so we've got to give them new tools and new habits that can help them cross-check to see whether something makes sense.
Yeah, being able to cross-check, to kind of go upstream in terms of, okay, let's follow the research and the data there. Where does that lead us? Are there other similarly credible organizations, institutions, journalism that's validating that and moving it across? And then, of course, you throw in this whole component of AI, and now we got a whole nother level of, we'll add it to the degree of difficulty score for both parents and for teachers.
Yeah, right? Because, especially when you start to think about this deep fakes that are going to start showing up more regularly, when you know that, parents are already being fooled by AI phone calls that impersonate the voice of their kids or their spouses, when you're 14 or 17, you don't have the maturity to kind of even sit down and sort through a lot of these things. So that's a huge part of it. And then the other part of the growing challenge, besides the AI, is that the people who have held themselves up as fact checkers have earned, I think, so much distrust. So much of what you see as fact checkers in the media often seems to be engaged in partisanship or seem to be pushing seem to be one-sided in their treatment of claims from competing camps. So when we start talking about helping students validate and cross-check, it's real easy for people to be skeptical and say, wait a minute, are these the same folks who told us that reopening schools or businesses during the pandemic was the same thing as human sacrifice? And so I think what we need also, and I think if folks read the interview, they'll see Sam struggling with this, is the need to distinguish between helping students form an informed opinion and check the validity of a site versus teachers telling students that's fake news and this is real news.
Yeah. Great insight, as always. Rick Hess, Senior Fellow and Director of Education Policy Studies at the American Enterprise Institute. Rick, as always, great insight. This is a crucial conversation we've got to get to, and thanks for helping us navigate it today.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's Rick Hess from AEI, and this is a big one. If students who are wonderful at navigating digital devices can't tell the difference between an ad and a news story, between an ad and propaganda, we got to teach them all the other skills in terms of checking the source, following the facts, and getting to the real story. That's a crucial set of skills for our young people. All right, we'll step aside for a quick break. More Inside Sources coming up next.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour, actually national story right now, the Florida Panhandle expecting a direct hit from Hurricane Helene with a storm surge up to 20 feet. Here's FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell during the White House
We have over
News
1,100
Conference.
personnel so far across the federal government supporting the preparedness efforts for this storm.
Red Cross volunteers from Utah also headed to Florida in advance of the storm. Police have arrested a suspect in yet another road rage shooting. This happened on Saturday near 45th South and 1300 East in Mill Creek.
The vehicle had passed into a bike lane, attempted to cut off the victim, and displayed a handgun and fired a shot at the victim's vehicle.
Unified Police Sergeant Amy Race says the police first got involved when they unknowingly performed a routine traffic stop on the victim, who told officers what had happened. Police arrested 33-year-old Kenneth Alfonso Richardson yesterday, having booked into jail on suspicion of 2 felonies with road rage enhancements. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up 211 points on the day, while the NASDAQ is up 112. And our KSL weather. We're dancing with some record highs over the next several days. That's next. KSL News Time 1:31.
News doesn't just mean information or dates.
It's the story of our local history being told in real time.
Be a part of the story. This is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
We hope to be a part of your story. We have you covered on KSL News Radio.
Tim Jr. here from RGS Exteriors. I want to tell you about our famous "You Don't Need a Warranty" warranty. That's right. It's a warranty you don't need, but we give it to you anyway. Let me explain. Most warranty problems for siding, gutters, and windows are caused by not installing stuff right in the first place. If you rush the work, cut corners, or use subpar materials, you're just begging for problems later. At RGS Exteriors, we don't tolerate careless workmanship. We slow down, focus on every detail, and use only the best materials. We prevent warranty work by doing the job right in the first place. That's why the 10-year everything guarantee we give you is also known as our "You Don't Need a Warranty" warranty. We absolutely will be there if you need to use it. But honestly, you probably will never have to. Done right the first time. That's the RGS way. For siding, gutters, and windows, call 801-280-3110 or visit us at rgsexteriors.com.
Hi, I'm Rachel, and I have a serious heart condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, or HCM. Some symptoms include being short of breath, feeling tired, or having dizziness or chest pain. I still had symptoms on my beta blocker, so I asked my cardiologist about any treatment advances. It was a breakthrough for me. That's why I'm working with Bristol Myers Squibb to raise awareness about HCM and to help others like me. Talk to your cardiologist today and visit hcmrealtalk.com for more information.
Sponsored by Bristol Myers Squibb.
Buying or selling a home is a big deal, literally. It's one of the largest financial transactions you're likely to make. So work with someone who will work with your best interests in mind. Someone who agrees to operate with transparency, honesty, and fairness every step of the way. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors and are bound by a strict code of ethics that requires they put your interests above their own. Because that's who we are. Make sure your agent is a Realtor.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Sinclair's Dino Pay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meese.
Cleanup continues on this crash northbound I-15 at the I-215 junction, the south interchange in Murray. It is over to the right shoulder. Fire crews have just pulled up on the scene. They'll partially block that right lane. Then more heavy and slow traffic anywhere from 33rd South into downtown. The 8th annual My Gluten Free World Expo is being held September 27th and 28th at the Mountain America Expo Center in Sandy. See over 100 vendors showcasing the best of gluten-free. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
Sunny skies through Sunday with highs in the 90s. And right now we're at 88 degrees. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
We often describe Congress metaphorically as fighting cats and dogs. But is the literal fight in Washington over cats and dogs, and who may or may not be eating them, preventing us from a more crucial conversation about immigration? A brilliant Substack piece by our good friend Johanna Maska talks about the cats and dogs and the immigration debate that we should be having in this nation. And, of course, Johanna is a great friend of the show, former Obama staffer, just a great writer, great thinker. And, Johanna, welcome back to the show.
Boyd, it is always a pleasure. It's
busy week in politics as always.
Just a few things going on, and I loved your Substack today. It got me thinking on so many levels. But I love the way you started out by talking about a friend, because that's often where we should begin these conversations. But walk us through that and just why we are so wildly missing the point, and what's actually happening with all the memes, the jokes around cats and dogs as it relates to immigration.
Well, I think a lot of us, when we watched that debate that President Trump and Kamala Harris weren't necessarily familiar with these allegations that President Trump brought up of Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio, he said, eating cats and dogs. Of course, that's unfounded, but it's driven so many debates about, and memes online about, the different cultures and coming to America. And I had to step back a little bit because I have a friend who is an immigrant to the United States who used to joke about eating my cats. We had these two cats, Thierry and Gloria, and we lived down the street from Mohammed El Hodiri, who was my dear friend and a college professor at the University of Kansas. And he'd always say, you can bring Thierry for dinner. He'd be a tasty snack. And he's an economics professor. So the other reason why I wanted to talk to him, because of course he made that joke, but the other reason I wanted to talk to him is because, in the back of my mind this whole time when we've been having this debate is immigration is essential to our economy. Yeah. And I wanted to reconnect with him. He's now 86 years old, long retired, has been studying economics. He literally was, studying the U.S. economic system during the Cold War. And he said to me, Johanna, there is no modern day America without immigration. Yeah. And we start going through the vast benefits that our country has received because of immigration. I think right now what's happened for too long, all these people have wanted these massive packages, and they've said, and you are very familiar with this, we need big reforms. And it's true, we do need big reforms, but in every one of those big reforms failing, we haven't reformed our immigration system in 30 years, which is just so crazy because this is an economic engine and we're letting people linger because we just don't believe that we should have action every year. So the other thing I said, Boyd, and this is my frustration, is even the Democrats seem to be falling prey to talking about immigration in negative terms, the gangs and cartels and, shutting down the border. And I understand the border it needs to be controlled. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But then we need to talk about what does a robust American economy look like, and how do we recruit the best and the brightest and workers from around the world who want to come here and expand our economy. Yeah. And that's we're just not even talking about it.
Yeah, we're not even in the right zip code or maybe even the right stratosphere for that conversation. And it was one that always baffled me in Washington. I remember one time we were sitting around. It was right before a big omnibus, so everybody's kind of lingering around waiting for a bill to drop so you can actually read it. And there was just this big, long hours and hours and hours where they just kept putting things off, and finally there was a group of senators, Democrats and Republicans, who decided just to get together and have a chat, and they talked about immigration. And I said there was 7 Democrats, I think there were 8 Republicans, and they all talked about all the things that they agree on when it comes to immigration, and many that you just described, Johanna, about this is part of the economic engine. We need an entry-exit system that works. We need to have a border that's secure. We need to make it easier to come here legally than it is to come here illegally. And they all agreed. I thought, oh my goodness, we could solve all of this in an afternoon, but we'd rather fight like cats and dogs and have wedge issues for campaigns and raise a whole lot of campaign cash off of it. And again, it's keeping us that safe distance from the conversation that we actually need because, as you said, we don't exist as a country without that modern immigration.
Well, and I think there's a flawed perspective of history of immigration that you and I probably both agree on. But the whole thing with Ellis Island, when Ellis Island was processing people, if you had enough money to get to America and you were healthy, you got in.
Yeah.
Now, there's all sorts of, problems that exist when every group gets to America. The Poles were discriminated against, the Irish were discriminated against, the Italians were discriminated against, the Germans. I mean, it's like everybody was discriminated against. And I did get one email. I always love getting the emails in response to the Substack, but I got one email that's kind of like, what happens when our community is flooded with a different group of people? And I'm like, well, that is actually the history of America.
Yeah.
And, like what actually happens and how those groups end up, agreeing on customs. And for the most part, what ends up happening is groups tend to isolate amongst themselves. And then the kids in school start getting to know each other. And then slowly but surely there's integration and there's less resentment. But that's our story. And, we have a problem with the southern border being completely overwhelmed, 100% agree. But it's partially because we've had no action. Because I guess we've been waiting on this big compromise. It's like, just pass something.
Yeah. Or if we just sit around here long enough, something magical will happen. The unicorns fly in, the border's secure, everything's fixed. But it's going to take some hard work and heavy lifting, I think, from a lot of those that are in power to say we've got to do this different. And it doesn't always have to be the all-inclusive, all-encompassing, but there's a whole lot of things that a whole lot of people agree on, and most Americans agree with, I think, in the end. But so often we get distracted by all of these other things. Johanna Maska, as always, fabulous perspective and a great story. And I'm so glad that he didn't actually eat your cat in the end.
He never did. As I said, all these years later, he did reassure me that was never going to happen.
And I just love that it is a neighbor and someone that you have great respect for, and that you can have that joke and you can get to the serious conversation as well. Johanna, thanks for carving out time for us today. As always, Johanna Maska, check out her Substack. It is always a fabulous read, and it will cause you to think again about what you think you know. Johanna, thanks for joining us today. Such an important conversation, and it's such an important example, not just of having a different kind of conversation around immigration. Again, we always try to do these big thousands and thousands of page bills that comprehensively deal with everything. But the reality is there's so many pieces of the puzzle that everybody agrees on. And so rather than go for the blue sky, shoot the moon, and then make it a 3,000-page all or nothing up or down vote, let's do it different. Let's break it down. There's so many things that can be agreed on. And again, it's not just immigration. It's a host of other issues. But instead, what we try to do is we try to play the politics of all these issues. And there's a whole industrial complex that feeds off of that. And all the social media memes and all the fundraising that goes out, all the wedge issues that are created so that we can have a really fun time listening to ads, watching them on TV and seeing them online as we go through a campaign season. Let's be done with that. Let's get down to the real principles and the real issues and have a different kind of conversation. We don't have to fight like cats and dogs, and we certainly do not need to be arguing over eating cats and dogs. That's keeping us a safe distance from actually solving the problem. All right, we'll step aside for a quick break. When we come back, more Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Winter is coming, but there's still time to replace those drafty old windows before the cold comes and drives up your heating bill. Just make one call and take advantage of the Advanced Window Products Fall Special. $2,500 off on 10 windows or more, and that's $2,500 off their already low factory direct prices because at Advanced Window Products, they're the factory. Your windows are built in their facility right here in Salt Lake City. You're buying local, and with their lifetime guarantee, you don't ever have to call some faraway state for help. Advanced Window Products is right here proudly backing up their work, so make one call, save on your heating bill, and get a rebate from the energy companies. Advanced Window Products offer 0% financing. They can even give you amazing new windows with no money down. And don't forget, $2,500 off their factory direct prices, but you have to call now. Advanced Window Products, 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100, or go to advancedwindows.com.
You trust us for news and information in your car. Now trust us at home. KSL News Radio has you covered, keeping you informed on the latest breaking news, weather, traffic, sports, and more. Listen on your Amazon Echo or Google Home device. Just say, Alexa, open KSL News Radio, or listen on the KSL News Radio Listen app. Text the word app to 57500. KSL News Radio. We have you covered.
Tommy! I can't wait for golf this weekend, huh, buddy? Time flies. Love you, man. Oh, don't forget your knee brace again. We aren't in college anymore.
Moments together matter, so help protect yourself from RSV. If you're 75 or older or 60 plus with a chronic condition like asthma, COPD, heart disease, or severe diabetes, you're at higher risk of landing in the hospital from RSV, and there are no prescription RSV treatments. Check eligibility and schedule your RSV vaccine at vaxassist.com. Sponsored by Pfizer.
Sweet chocolate reward. Sweet chocolate reward.
This is not just the sound of someone picking up a sweet treat at Walgreens. This is the sound of someone picking up a sweet treat right after receiving all their vaccines in one trip. This is the sound of treating yourself, because you protected yourself.
Stop by or schedule both your flu and COVID-19 vaccines today and grab yourself a sweet treat while you're at it. Vaccine subject to availability. State, age, and health-related restrictions may apply.
Join Lagoon's maintenance and construction team for the most thrilling job around. Lagoon is looking for exceptional ride technicians, skilled carpenters, electricians, plumbers, and more. Lagoon offers excellent training programs with amazing career opportunities. These positions are both full-time and year-round. Apply online today at lagoonpark.com/jobs. Join the Lagoon team and help us maintain the fun. Must be 18 years of age or older to apply.
Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. So at Consumer Cellular, we're lowering the price for those 50 and up. Now you can get unlimited talk, text, and data for $30 a line when you buy two. That's just $60 a month for 2 unlimited lines. So if you're 50 and up, make the switch and save. Come on, you've earned this. Call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com today. Requires 2 lines of service, age validation, and credit approval, subject to system and area limits, taxes, and other fees apply.
Mom, meet Sarah.
From first-time Nana moments.
Welcome to Flight 101.
To annual girls trip moments. Your can't-miss moments are worth protecting against RSV. If you're 75 or older or 60 plus with a chronic condition like asthma, COPD, heart disease, or severe diabetes, you're at higher risk of landing in the hospital from RSV. And there are no prescription RSV treatments. Check eligibility and schedule your RSV vaccine at vaxassist.com.
So where should we go next?
Sponsored by Pfizer.
Any Hour Services free furnace sale is going on right now. If you haven't scheduled your free estimate yet, what are you waiting for? Call Any Hour Services today or schedule online at anyhourservices.com.
Dave and Debbie.
It's impossible to digest and consume all of the news that's now coming at us through either social media or through web pages or through the radio. Pick what is most impactful in your life and focus on that. And that's what Dave and I do every single morning. We pick those issues that are most important to our listeners and we boil it down so it's digestible. It's simple to understand.
I think we're trying to find the essence of the story. You know, you can't be an expert on all things, but that doesn't mean you can't be curious and really find out more and educate yourself and learn the complexities of an issue. But I think all of us start at ground zero on everything. Ask questions, show that curiosity.
And then if you need more research, you can always go to KSLNewsRadio.com and learn more.
Listen for Dave and Dejanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
At Social Security, we are always thinking of ways to save you time and make things easier. That's why we created My Social Security. Opening a My Social Security account gives you secure access to your personal record and interactive tools tailored for you. You can see if you are eligible to receive benefits, view spousal benefit estimates, and compare retirement benefit estimates at different ages or dates when you want to start receiving benefits. Already receiving benefits? Use your account to change your address, set up or change direct deposit, get a proof of income letter, and more. In most states, you can also request a replacement Social Security card. Save time. Go online. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow. Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, Hurricane Helene, now a Category 3 storm with winds of 120 miles an hour moving toward the Florida Panhandle. Second, police reporting another road rage incident involving a gun, this time in the Mill Creek area. And third, the percentage of people living in poverty around the country has been going up, especially among children. 88 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Well, as college campuses fill up, there's groups that are still trying to capitalize on the mass protest movement we saw over the past summer, the war with Israel and Hamas, not over a year later. And we're nearing that anniversary of October the 7th, of course. And while protest and freedom of expression are vital and protected rights, crucial on our college campuses, we've seen a lot of attempts by students and other groups to bend universities to their whims, to their wills, to their demands, and exercise power against the institutions that they should be learning from. So part of this is the cancel culture mentality and mindset. And we want to get today in terms of what kind of leaders and what kind of faculty is it going to take to reshape and reframe what those conversations ought to look like and what they ought to sound like. Well, someone we always turn to, Samuel Abrams, of course, is a professor at Sarah Lawrence College, non-resident senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and he always gets us to the questions related to civic charity and civil society and political culture and American ideologies. And Professor Abrams, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be here.
So you have explained and you have experienced what is going on college campuses and why it's created this interesting dynamics now where a lot of professors are self-censoring their own speech because of this whole cancel culture and kind of this mob mentality.
Sure. So I'm actually speaking to you from Sarah Lawrence, which is the first time I've done that in a while, but I'm here today teaching. I'm very lucky to have some very good students, but these are the minority. These are the students who came to me because they want to hear heterodox ideas. They want to hear multiple points of view, and it's a real delight. But they were nervous when they started. They were nervous because cancel culture and mob mentality work. That's what's so very frightening. Now, this doesn't represent most students. This represents a small, well-organized, loud group of people, and that's all it takes to silence an entire campus. Faculty do not want to be the focus of social media. Neither do students. Students don't want the attention, and neither do faculty. So a few weeks ago, because I am a Jew who supports Israel and supports Israel's right to defend itself, I don't write or talk about this on campus. I'm not an activist in this space. A group called the Divestment Coalition decided, for reasons I still don't fully understand, to attack me. They decided to announce a boycott. They disrupted my classes. They intimidated students. And it was a mess. I asked the administration here at Sarah Lawrence if they would speak up. First, it was an overt form of anti-Semitism. Secondly, it's illiberal to cancel professors. What we do is we just don't take them if we don't like them. But the idea that you would boycott someone's point of view, not a great thing to do. And then to disrupt actual classes and intimidate students from their learning is a big no-no and a big problem in our handbook. And I believe this is the case for almost every school. The difference this time is that not only did the administration choose to remain silent, they've said nothing about any of this, but I've had no colleagues publicly defend me and condemn this behavior. Why? These small minority of voices have become so good at attacking and harassing and intimidating. No one wants that attention. They don't want people showing up at their homes. They don't want to be protested and disrupted at school. They just want to be left alone. So we are now in a scary world where the minority is winning. And that's really very, very dangerous for ideas, our university, and our civic health.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bad day for the constitutional republic when we get into that level of space where that angry mob, the angry minority, the loud and vocal, the cancel culture can really stifle the very things that we should be doing on our college campuses, the very things that students need to learn in order to function in a society in terms of being challenged and sharpening their own arguments and learning the give and take, and to be surprised or to have that humility and radical curiosity. And I want to dig in just for a minute on on the other faculty, because I find that so interesting. And you cited some statistics in a piece that you penned recently, talking about how many academics are kind of living under the stress of, hey, I just want to teach, I just want to fly under the radar, focus on my specialty, and so they're living in a little bit of fear that I don't think we normally associate with being a teacher on campus.
So that's a partial truth, not the full truth. So there's a large number of faculty members, and they tend to be older faculty, that is completely a true statement. They want to do their ivory tower work, whether it's medieval or Renaissance studies or biology, all worth doing, all important, and they don't want to be in the midst of these cultural wars, so they try to stay out of it. There are, however, a large number of younger faculty members, and it's really worth mentioning these people, because these folks came a little bit after me. I'm in my 40s, but what's interesting is I noticed younger generations of faculty, they're scholar activists. They see their work as something far beyond just the ivory tower and the high-level intellectual work. They see their work as linked explicitly to activism. It's not just teaching. It's teaching with an explicit activist, correcting correcting wrongs with rights, and it becomes a very different mode. So I think there are still large numbers of folks who would like to be just doing their thing, teaching and being a little quirky, but then there are also faculty who are egging the students on. And on various faculty social media accounts, they were supporting the students in this boycott and cancellation attempt big time. And I can tell you that the faculty who are not activists just didn't want that spotlight on them, sadly.
Yeah. Dig into that just a little bit in terms of educator as activist, because that is a really dangerous space in my view in terms of what that does for the next generation of thinkers and how we approach a lot of the big challenges, the contentious issues of the day, when it is solely a right to be wrong, or I'm right and you're wrong, and therefore I can have some contempt for you or protest you or cancel you. That leads us into some pretty scary spaces.
It leads us into some scary space. It also undermines and hollows out the purpose of the academy. So if you look at a lot of reading lists, if you look at a lot of what these faculty do, they're not necessarily as well versed on the traditional literatures. And what they have to produce in terms of creating new knowledge is severely diminished. In a lot of cases, younger faculty will now say, well, look, activism is part of my file, and that should count for something. Writing popular press pieces that are active in nature should count. The scholarship, less so, not as important. So we've seen a very, very significant and real shift, not everywhere, but significantly, especially in the humanities and especially in the social sciences, where if you look at department web pages, they explicitly are politically engaged departments with political agendas. That shouldn't be the case. These places should be neutral. Our search for knowledge should be neutral. Our teaching should be neutral. And you should present the whole cornucopia, a plethora of ideas. And that's not happening. So you really have, the older faculty just saying, I want to stay away. I don't want to stand up for this. Please leave me alone. Please pretend I'm not here. And then overwhelmingly folks who are left of center being activists, social justice types of faculty. And social justice is so important, but it's about how we do it and how we live those values.
I want to stay with this conversation and have you back, Professor Abrams. It comes down on campus to leadership. It's a leadership issue, and that starts at the top of those institutions. Samuel Abrams, professor at Sarah Lawrence College, non-resident senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, one of my favorite thinkers and writers. And thanks so much for joining us today. Great stuff.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back with hour number 2 of Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. Our top national story this hour. That's Hurricane Helene's storm surge coming over the seawall on Bayshore Boulevard in Tampa. Helene is now a Category 3 hurricane with winds of 120 miles an hour. Hundreds of thousands of people have evacuated in advance of the storm. UTA looking at double tracking the Frontrunner system in upcoming years to provide faster service and more options for riders. The executive director of UTA, Jay Fox, tells KSL at Night it'll open up other opportunities as well.
The other nice thing is it opens the door to Sunday service, right? Because one of the reasons we don't offer Sunday service is because that's the day we get out to maintain the railroad.
UTA hopes to have the project completed by 2034, just in time for the Winter Olympics. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average up 260 points on the day right now. The NASDAQ up 108 as we approach the close of trading. And our KSL weather, sunshine for the next several days with temperatures close to record-breaking territory. That's next. KSL News Time 2:01.
You know what's great about KSL's traffic coverage? Trained traffic reporters and real listeners.
Trading information and making the commute safer and faster for everyone.
Every 10 minutes on the nines, we have you covered on KSL News Radio.
Hi, this is Doug Wright. I've got to tell you about my experience at Hale Center Theater, one of the opening nights for The Magician's Elephant. Now, I knew it was going to be a U.S. premiere. I knew this was going to be something brand new, but I wasn't quite prepared for just how charming this play indeed is. It's all about a young orphan boy who promised his dying mother that he would keep an eye on and watch out for his little sister, but where is she? Only the magician's elephant knows. You're going to love The Magician's Elephant. And I'll tell you, I'm used to spectacular things unfolding on the stage, but there is the exit of a major character that is simply magical, almost molecular. One of the most amazing things I've ever seen on a Hale Center Theater stage, and boy, that is saying something. Don't forget, we also have The Addams Family, still to come, Beauty and the Beast. Get your tickets now for A Christmas Carol. Go to hct.org.
Have you ever heard of the 5 Ps? That's right, the 5 Ps. These can be applied to most every area of your life, but it's especially true for you and your money. I'm Jeff Jr. with Trajan Wealth, and many years ago when I was a young man in the Marine Corps, I learned about the 5 Ps. Proper planning prevents poor performance. Now, you can't control what's happening with the stock market, but you can control how you plan for it. Trajan Wealth and our fiduciary advisors have been helping our clients with the 5 Ps for years. We have hearts of teachers and will never complicate by using financial jargon. Our fee structure is transparent. The more you make, the more we make. The majority of our clients come from other financial advisors. Isn't it time for a second opinion to allow Trajan Wealth to help you with the 5 Ps too? Call Trajan today at 801-899-7600 or visit TrajanWealth.com.
Advisory services offered through Trajan Wealth LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. And here's Ricky Meese.
We do have a crash right in the heart of the valley, westbound I-80 at about State Street. It's been moved out of traffic to the shoulder. Also an accident. It may be a hit and run near that same area, 2100 south at about 4th East. If you're headed northbound on I-15, we still have just a little bit of busy traffic going from Midvale at 72nd South up to the South Interchange. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
It'll be sunny through Sunday with highs in the 90s, possibly into record territory by the weekend. And right now, we're at 90 degrees with sunshine. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson.
On Utah's home for elevated conversation.
Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
The headline, of course, is that the Utah Supreme Court has ruled that the hotly debated Amendment D will be voided on this year's ballot. Even though it will appear on the ballot, it will not count. But I want to go beyond the headline, have a little deeper discussion about ballot initiatives here in the state of Utah. So beyond the headline, how does the ballot initiative process actually work? How could it work better? What does that look like? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Look, and the headline is that the Utah Supreme Court ruled that hotly debated Amendment D will be voided. Won't count, won't move through. But I want to get a deeper dive into the whole process. Someone who understands that in a very unique way. Our good friend Mara Carabello is the founder and president of the Exoro Group, a recognized communications policy and strategy extraordinaire person. And Mara, thanks for carving out some time for us on a busy day.
Absolutely, Boyd. Always nice to be with you.
All right, and so let's unpack this a little bit for our listeners, and let's just start, obviously, with Amendment D. A lot of controversy around there in terms of what did happen, what didn't happen. Language was confusing, and so we're to this point where it isn't going to count, but let's start looking at what does count and what should count in a good ballot initiative process.
Great. One thing I've always found interesting, and I think our listeners will probably agree, and it is bipartisan, is that it should be relatively infrequent or unusual that we see a ballot measure, right? I mean, I think Utah's ethic is that by and large, you use the process that is the legislative process. So I've never heard any disagreement on the fact that it should be relatively difficult and you have to be pretty serious. And maybe you've attempted and tried to go and bring this piece of legislation. And maybe it's a rare instance where we don't think our representatives are being responsive to us. So I think there's almost consensus that ballot measures in Utah should be rare and hard. But then you get into the details, Boyd, of, okay, well, what does it take to get an initiative on, and do we have it right? You asked do we have the right formula? Do we need to change the formula?
Yeah, and so let's unpack that formula in terms of what it currently is, and then of course we also have this back end element in terms of what the legislature can or can't do once a ballot initiative is passed, and the strengths and weaknesses of that as well. And so unpack that a little bit. Let's start from the front end. What does it actually take?
What does it take? So I'm looking at a condensed memo right now that is 9.5 pages of what it takes. It outlines 16 steps. And so it goes from anywhere from you need to collect a percentage of the last presidential election. In this moment in time, it's 134,000 plus. You have to distribute those signatures in 26 of 29 Senate districts. You have to do it over a short period of time. You have to do a fiscal note. You have to do 7 public hearings. You have to have it reviewed by the Constitutional and Fiscal Analysis. You have to post it up. We've been hearing a lot about the requirement. Then you have to have these really detailed, you can only print, and you have to print on a certain color, and you have to distribute, you have to have Utah citizens. I could keep going. So it has 16 steps in which, and that, remember, is to qualify to make the ballot. Now, when you qualify to make the ballot, you then, if you're someone for or against it, you need to now, that just gets you to the starting gate.
Right.
And then you have to run a campaign that persuades or objects, whichever side you're on, that persuades people to either vote for or against it. So you're really running 2 campaigns. One is to just make the mark. Now, we have one of the highest thresholds. I would tell you what I don't like is that it's so specific and it's so hard. It's resulted, I have found the general rule in political processes, the more detailed and hard they are, the more you only get professionals to do them. And I always love processes where citizens can rise up. So I think we're a little complicated right now, and I think it will require you to hire people like me, which we shouldn't require, right? So I think we have a little too many details right now, and it should be hard, but a citizens group should be able to do it. And the other thing with the complications, Boyd, the biggest downside is you almost assuredly have to pay signature gatherers because it's just too hard to make it through volunteers. So that's the downside right now. But gosh, we all want to make it hard.
Yeah.
So that's it. And so that right now we're probably the hardest state in the union except Wyoming to get on the ballot. Again, 16 steps. My short memo is 9 pages. And because it's so complex, can average citizens band together and do this? I think we may have it be a little too complicated. I'll also tell you that there is a call and response. Anytime a ballot measure is passed, the legislature has made it more complicated to get on. Now let's talk about the backside, because that's really what Amendment D was sort of about, some consequences. And prior to the Supreme Court ruled in July, an 84-page ruling, it was very specific to a kind of ballot measure, and it was about ballot measures changing the government. But what the new part was is that right now under the law, the Supreme Court can amend and can edit, and you need that ability. Let's say there's a typo. Let's say over the years systems change, and you need to update that law. I think we all agree that you have to have laws that can grow and move and shape when the rest of the laws in the section do. What was the poison pill for many people in D was that it allowed the legislature to wholesale repeal, not just improve, not just to make compliant, but they could repeal it. If you put in the word repeal, you have to ask yourself the question, well, does a ballot measure ever really matter if the majority, and you got to figure the reason you went to a ballot measure was that those same people weren't listening to you in the first place. So that's the challenge with putting repeal in.
I think that's I love the points that you're raising, Mara, because one, it should be a citizens process. It should be easy enough. The bar should be low enough that citizens can do it. And as much as we love to hire you, and I'd hire you at 6 ways to Sunday, we shouldn't have to. We can, but it shouldn't be a requirement. The signature gathering is a whole nother conundrum and industrial complex that is way too expensive and way too hard. An average citizen group just can't do that. And then, of course, on the back end, yes, we've got to have something in there because there may be a ballot initiative that doesn't factor in how much it's going to cost, or that it's going to cost more than they thought it would, and of course the legislature's got to be able to deal with that. But to your point, the repeal word is the one that I think gets everybody to say, wait a minute, what are we really doing? And an amendment, a healthy amendment process, is crucial. It's crucial to be able to do that.
And amending and repealing are not the same thing. I mean, just to say it again, to be able to amend and improve a law makes some sense. To be able to repeal, then you have to ask yourself, well, then this isn't real. This is just a token at citizen involvement. It's not a meaningful direct ability for the citizens to make their own laws in rare instances.
See, and that's why I'd hire you any day, Mara, making the sense of the nonsense for us. We appreciate you connecting all the dots for us. Mara Caravella, best of the best in the business. And, of course, you can always hear her on KSL at night as well. And, Mara, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, great stuff there from Mara. Always insightful. And I think she really hit the key components to all of this. Again, underneath the headline of Amendment D, there's the process on the front end to just get on the ballot. We do have one of the highest thresholds in the country. It is hard. It requires professionals. It requires a lot of money. And so, of course, that attracts outside interests as well. So, yeah, there is a concern there. But it's a concern because it is so hard. And there are so many steps. If the abridged version is 9 pages, we got a problem, folks. That is not simple. That is not easy. And it's too expensive. And so if we want to have something where the public, if they feel like they're being ignored by the legislature, has to have a process to do that. And I think we can make the adjustments and the tweaks to get that front end right. We have the right kinds of things on the ballot. As Mara said, it should be rare, and hopefully it is rare. And then on the back end, the difference between amend and repeal are expansive and massive and make all the difference. Because if it's just as easy to just repeal in the end on something that citizens felt like they were being ignored on, and so they're going to bring it up themselves, then we've really come to the wrong spot in the road. And so to me, it's a think again moment in terms of the process, what can be done, and then how do we do this? It should be there, it should be rare, but there should be a path so that the citizen's voice is always heard. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Next Saturday, it's the fall return of General Conference. KSL is pleased to broadcast live the 194th Semi-Annual General Conference of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. coverage starts both Saturday and Sunday at 9:30. We invite you to join us at 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and streaming live on the app for KSL News Radio.
Transform your old, outdated kitchen with Half Price Granite. For a limited time, Half Price Granite is offering special pricing starting at $25 per square foot installed. That's lower than most big box stores. These prices are some of the lowest around. Granite, quartz, marble, and quartzite, all starting at $25 per square foot installed. Call 801-486-1700 or visit halfpricegranite.com. Half Price Granite, affordable luxury.
Nearly 70% of Utah's land is controlled by the federal government, severely limiting Utah's ability to actively manage and protect our natural resources. Our families, businesses, and communities know there's a better way. Utahns have been good stewards of our public lands for generations. That's why we're asking each and every Utahn to get informed, speak up, and learn more at standforourland.utah.gov.
Are you within 5 years of filing for Social Security? Get this. 96% of Americans forfeit an average of $111,000 in Social Security income. And it's all because they filed for their benefits at the wrong time. Learn how you could avoid this with a free, customized Social Security analysis from Boss Retirement Solutions, 5-time winners of the Best of State Award. If you've saved more than $200,000 for retirement and have not filed for Social Security, schedule your free analysis now by calling 801-896-9622. You know, for some people, filing for Social Security early could result in more net income in retirement. Discover how you could get the most income from Social Security. Call 801-896-9622. 801-896-9622.
Advisory services offered through Boss Retirement Advisors, an SEC-registered investment advisory firm. Insurance products and services offered through Boss Retirement Solutions.
Dan owed an unbelievable amount of money to the IRS.
I got behind on my taxes. It's a horrible feeling.
He was in denial.
And when I got those letters from the IRS, you wanted to act like they didn't exist.
Finally, Dan turned to Optima Tax Relief, the leading tax resolution firm. A-plus rated by the Better Business Bureau, they've resolved over $1 billion for their clients.
Optima got me a settlement with the IRS. These people are really people-friendly. It was every bit of a new lease on life for me.
The fast action and the great results made Dan's head spin.
I felt like I was in a dream, but it's real, and I have paperwork to prove it. They got the job done, and life is good.
For tax help you can trust, call Optima now for a free consultation.
If you're worried about what's going to happen with the IRS, stop worrying. Make the call now.
Call 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460.
Optima Tax Relief.
Testimonial from an actual client. Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
Jeff Kaplan. I'm energized by breaking news. First of all, because it's right now, and second of all, because in many cases the audience needs to know. There's no more important service that we can provide, and I find it critically important to get more details to the audience as quickly as possible. There's nothing more energizing than that for me. Not at all. The most important thing we do is breaking news. I am gratified that so many people listen to me every afternoon on KSL, but what they don't know is that there are so many people behind the scenes making it happen, checking on the traffic, answering the phones, making the calls, talking to the newsmakers. They're out in the street, into the field to get the raw information, and then putting it all together so that I can sit in front of a microphone and be a source of information every afternoon. But there are so many people who make it happen. That's what you don't know.
Ride Home with Jeff Kaplan, weekdays 3 to 7 on KSL News Radio.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, the storm surge from Hurricane Helene already coming ashore in Tampa. It's expected to hit the Florida Panhandle tonight. Second, UTA says it has a way to speed up front-runner commuter train service if it can double-track its current system. Third, another road rage incident involving a gun has been reported in the Mill Creek area. 88 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Well, in this lovely era of escalating national debt, runaway government spending, there are some things that you can count on every year. And, of course, we always know there'll be drama around September 30th because September 30th always comes, and it is the date when the fiscal year ends and Congress is supposed to have funded the government. And, of course, we just experienced it in the last 24 hours. They kicked the can down the road into December, just as we predicted, and more spending to follow. But there's another ritual, not the start of college football, not coming up on pumpkin spice lattes or whatever it is. It's Senator Rand Paul's plan that he unveils every year, and he's made some slight adjustments to it this year. We want to dig into it because it's actually a plan that we all ought to think again about. Eric Boehm, of course, a reporter at Reason, covers economic policy, trade policy, and the elections, and covered Rand Paul's plan to balance the budget. And Eric, welcome back to the show.
Hey, glad to be here, Boyd. Thanks for having me.
All right, break this down for us. This has become an annual tradition with Senator Paul. He's had to make a few adjustments over the years, but give us the current version.
Yeah, that's right. This is a bit of a gimmicky thing that Senator Rand Paul does every year on the Senate floor when he offers this, budget plan that would balance the federal budget over 5 years. And it's a combination of sort of an immediate spending cut and then spending caps going forward. And as you said, the specifics have changed over the years. We can get into that because I think that's actually the more interesting thing there. But the newsy part of this is that he did this yesterday. He spoke on the Senate floor, offered this proposal. It was, of course, immediately voted down. I actually got the numbers from his staff on how many yes votes he's gotten for this over the years. And yesterday's actually got the most yes votes ever. Hey. So might be some, movement in the right direction there. But nowhere near enough to pass. And certainly I think, it's one of those things where if it did have a chance to pass, you'd actually see fewer people voting for it. You can, signal something by supporting this. But he calls it this year, he calls it the 6 penny plan. It would basically be as I said, an immediate budget cut. And then the budget cut basically amounts to 6 pennies out of every dollar that the federal government spends. That's all it would take. And you balance the budget in 5 years. But, that's a non-starter in D.C.
Yeah, and it does, as you pointed out in the headline to your piece at Reason.com today, that it exposes and illustrates Congress's addiction to borrowing. I think is the big thing. And so take us underneath the hood a little bit. As you said, that is the more interesting part of this. And to me, just the concept of 6 pennies off of every dollar, I think every household in America, if they were experiencing a mega shortfall in the family budget, could go around and say, okay, every category we have in our family budget, we're taking 6 cents off the dollar. It doesn't seem that radical, and it doesn't seem that extreme.
Right. I mean, it does. It seems like the simplest way to go about this, right? And that's the point that he makes is that, this is if you want to balance the budget, obviously there are difficult decisions there that need to be made, but ultimately it's a kind of simple fiscal calculus, right? I mean, like we basically know how much tax revenue the government's going to collect in future years. And so it's not that difficult to do. As the proposal that he put out there on the Senate floor yesterday would actually have been a $329 billion cut for the new fiscal year that starts next year. But then there's a few other things in there, like it would actually keep the 2017 tax cuts, make them permanent. Of course, this is going to be a big discussion next year in D.C. when those tax cuts are set to expire. But he would actually keep those tax cuts in place. And so even though that kind of reduces future federal revenues marginally, you could still balance the budget, even with keeping those tax cuts in place if you make this 6% cut and then stick to some spending caps for a few years after that. And as I pointed out in the piece, I think the most interesting part of this is it's kind of become a demonstration of just how out of whack the federal budget has gotten, because when he started doing this in 2018, it was the 1 penny plan. It was cut 1 penny out of every dollar for the next 5 years, and you balance the budget. And now here we are, just 6 years later, and we're already up to the 6 penny plan. To your point, doesn't seem like it's that difficult to do. Doesn't seem like it's that unreasonable. Seems like a still thing to do. But the trajectory there, I think, tells you something about the fact that it's getting harder to make the budget balance, and it's only going to get harder in the years to come.
I know, which is amazing, because if we would have started on the penny plan in 2018, it actually would be balanced now, right? 6 years down the road, we'd be in that balance, and imagine where we'd be. We could actually start paying down what is now $35 trillion. I think you noted in your piece that it was only, $23 trillion, a paltry $23 trillion in 2018. But being able to do that, and I love the way you pointed this out, that, look, we can do this and we can still keep tax cuts. We can deal with Social Security. We can, shore up those kinds of things. So it can be done, but not if you're just always willing to spend just a little more on whatever it is, whether it's free college, free this, free that. We got to have a different kind of conversation.
Well, and he made that point on the Senate floor yesterday as part of his speech, and I think I think Rand does a great job of making this point. It makes this point more than just once a year, but of sort of stressing the amount of waste and the amount of misallocated spending that exists within the federal government. I mean, my goodness, if you could just eliminate the amount of improper payments that programs like Medicare and Medicaid make. I mean, you save hundreds of billions of dollars a year doing that. He likes to talk about other things like, National Science Foundation funding or National Institute of Health funding for like studying the sexual appetites of Japanese quail and things like this that are quite fun and amusing, even if they're, really only drops in the federal bucket. I mean, he made the point on the floor that this is, there's no such thing as free college. There's no such thing as free housing. There's no free lunch. There's no money up here is the way he put it. Like, it's not like Congress has stacks of money to be distributing, that all this money is, in fact, increasingly, it's not even taxed from one person to give to somebody else. Increasingly, it's that we just borrow it and just print it to give it to somebody. And that is, I think, unsustainable. I think he would agree with that. And so that's why a plan like this is, like, on one hand, it's a little bit of a gimmick because, really balancing the budget requires some really, I think, difficult conversations. We've talked about this on this show, right? Some really difficult conversations about programs like Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. Just saying we're going to cut 6% off the top, not a super realistic thing, but it's at least to your point, it's at least having this conversation. And that's a conversation that just does not happen anywhere near enough right now in Washington.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I always point out, and whether it's a business or a university or a nonprofit institution, we always talk about the money problem, and all of those are leadership problems. If an institution, needs to get something done, they can go raise the money. But it's not that they don't have the money. It's that nobody's leading to create a cause for the money. And when it comes to our government, you pointed this out, that the government will bring in $4 trillion, and yet we're going to spend $6 billion. I'm bad at math, but that's pretty easy math, and the math always wins in the end. But to me, it's not a dollars and cents, and it's not about having the guys from the CBO in with the visors on to count the pennies and check the zeros. This is a leadership issue.
Well, I'll leave it on this point. And you mentioned this a couple minutes ago, that if we had adopted the penny plan back in 2018, where would we be today? So in 2018, the federal government spent just over $4 trillion. And as you just mentioned, we're going to collect well over $4 trillion this year in taxes. So there you go. If we had just held spending level, now I know that's 6 years. I know there's been inflation. I know there was a pandemic in there too, so that ramped up some things. But if we had held the baseline spending close to being level for just 6 years, just since 2018, we would be in balance right now. But of course we haven't. We're going to spend over $6 trillion this year. That baseline has jumped from $4 to $6 trillion in just 6 years. And there you go. That's the deficit right there. So it's not that you really have to cut that much to bring things into balance. You just have to hold spending level, hold it steady for, just a few years. And that really changes the math long term. But, we're not capable of doing that.
You got to have leadership to just, even if it's just to stand still and do nothing, would take us a long, long way. As always, Eric Boehm helps us make sense of all of this. Great, an extraordinary reporter at reason.com. You can check out his piece there. And Eric, thanks for helping us make it all make sense. And hopefully we'll see some of that leadership. And maybe one day a 6-penny plan, or maybe it's going to have to be a 10-penny plan by the time we get around to it with leadership. But we'll get there. We appreciate you joining us as always.
Thanks so much, Boyd. You're more optimistic than I am. I appreciate that. Cheers.
All right. That's Eric Boehm from Reason. You can check out his piece at reason.com, and we'll get there. We have to get there. The consequences, the absolute predictability of consequences, we'll get this thing to balance somehow. But sadly, if we don't have leadership, then we're going to end up doing this on the backs of those who can least afford it and those who it will hurt the most, the poor and the most vulnerable among us. So we got to get to the serious part, and that's going to take leadership. We'll be right back.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story, or actually top national story at this hour, Hurricane Helene moving up Florida's Gulf Coast, expected to make landfall tonight as a major storm in Florida's Big Bend region. Hundreds of thousands of people have evacuated. Rob Pocrefi has decided to stay put at his home in Tampa.
You don't want to just go driving around. You never know where it's going to head. So I think we would just hunker down and ride it out.
Further up the coast, evacuations, though, are now mandatory. FanX began today in Salt Lake City. Dan Farr, the FanX producer, says this year already promises to be bigger than last. For instance, there are more than 100 celebrity guests, and some even had to be turned away.
We can't get everybody in. We only have room for so many people, and that's because the fans here are unlike anywhere else. They really are amazing people, and they take care of the celebrity guests so well.
Farr says ticket sales are ahead of last year as well. The convention books more than 8,000 room nights, boosting the local economy. Some of the celebrities this year include Mel Gibson, Danny Glover, and a host of actors from the Lord of the Rings movies. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average closing trading today up 260 points. The NASDAQ was up 108. The S&P 500 was up 23. And our KSL weather, we're looking at possibly setting new temperature records this weekend. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:31.
We hope you have the right app on your phone for news. You probably have dozens.
But the KSL News Radio app, well, it makes our live stream super easy.
Plus, our talk shows are right there as podcast for your workday.
That's the app for KSL News Radio.
It's hard to believe that it was exactly 1 year ago that I started my health journey with the help and guidance of my friends at Soda Weight Loss. I'd recently been diagnosed as diabetic. I was tired a lot, had severe sleep apnea. I knew something had to change. But over the next 5 months, I let go of 70 pounds of fat weight, dropped from a size 42 waist to a size 34, cut my A1C in half, and my sleep apnea lessened to mild. Best of all, I did it without drugs, pills, injections, or crazy side effects. That's because I had help every step of the way from a nutritionist like Rebecca.
I'd recommend it to anyone who is just at that point where they're frustrated and they need guidance, because they will get that here, and they'll have a full team of nutritionists that are dedicated in truly teaching them how to eat better so they can live a longer, healthier life and be there for their families.
Please see the results for yourself. Go to sodaweightloss.com and then click Request a Nutritionist Callback. It's that easy. Get started now and look great for the holidays by going to sotaweightloss.com, because soda is state of the art.
My wife and I always loved doing everything together. Jiu-jitsu, kayaking, and intimacy was always on point. It was around my early 30s when I noticed a downward trend. Watching a lot of TV, putting on weight, and just full of self-doubt. I had tried another men's clinic with disappointing results. It's the personalized treatment I receive at Revive Men's Health that has been the complete game changer for me. I've got my energy and motivation back, I'm feeling stronger than I did in my 20s, and it made me a much better husband to my wife.
I'm Eric Ramos, healthcare provider at Revive Men's Health. If you are always feeling tired or moody, have a difficult time sleeping, or decreased libido, you may be suffering from low testosterone.
Book your free T-check and exam at Revive Men's Health, Salt Lake City. Call 801-263-7777. That's 801-263-7777. Or visit ReviveMen'sHealth.com.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Sinclair's DinoPay app. Save up to 20 cents per gallon. Here's Ricky Meeks.
We still have the cleanup of this crash westbound I-80 near State Street. It is out of traffic on the shoulder. Valley Freeway traffic seeing a delay-free drive, but we also have a surface street crash near 5100 West and about 1500 South. Ricky Meeks in the KSL Traffic Center.
Sunny skies through Sunday with highs in the 90s, close to record territory by the time we get to Saturday. And right now, we're at 90 degrees and sunny. I'm Dan Bomas from the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios. Listen online at kslnewsradio.com. We're Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
America's political polarization is something society has shrugged its shoulders at, scratched its head over for far too long. And, of course, we continue to say that we're not that divided. We're not as divided as many in the political class or the fundraising class or the political party class want us all to believe. But there's some interesting new data that's emerging, some revelations about an important piece of the puzzle. And it's that many politicians may be misrepresenting their constituents, not necessarily out of malice or ill intent, but out of genuine misunderstanding. So the disconnect is both a challenge, but it's also an opportunity for American democracy to get better, to reduce the polarization and improve what this should be about in a constitutional republic, improved representation. Nicholas Stephanopoulos is the Kirkland and Ellis Professor of Law at Harvard Law School and a member of the academic team behind True Views. Has a great piece in The Hill today. You can check that out at thehill.com, saying that America is less polarized than it seems. Politicians need better data. And Professor, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic piece today. And let's just start at the very beginning as you look at this from a data standpoint. I think we all agree we're probably not as polarized as some want us to believe. But what does the data tell us, and why is it that we're not getting that data to the right people in the right places?
Yeah, great. Right. So the data about public opinion suggests that there are a lot of moderate centrist Americans. The American public is not divided into very liberal and very conservative people with almost nobody in the middle. But then the trouble is that detailed data about what people think at local levels is almost always absent. And so politicians usually don't know what people think about abortion, about taxes, about gun control within districts or zip codes or localities. And so in the absence of actual data, it turns out politicians misperceive public opinion. There's a really consistent pattern where Democratic politicians think that their constituents are more liberal than they really are, and Republican politicians think that their constituents are more conservative than they really are. And so that misperception appears to be one of the drivers of why politicians are more polarized than voters themselves are.
Yeah, I think that's such a key piece of this whole puzzle. I just want to unpack that a little bit more because, again, I think you're exactly right that if the Democratic politicians are saying, hey, I think my people are further to the left, and if the Republicans are saying, now our constituents are further to the right, that's going to get us more of that extreme, and it tends to also get us the loud and the noisy, and it also tends to shut down that movable middle, those who are, as you said, in that more moderate space in between, who then suddenly feel like they don't have a voice, and as a result, sometimes they're the ones who end up disconnecting from political conversations and the public square.
Yeah, you mentioned the noisy people. So part of what I think is driving the politicians' misperceptions is they don't hear equally from all of their constituents. They hear a lot from campaign donors who are well known to be a very ideologically extreme group of people. They hear from activists. They hear from people who care a lot about politics, who tend to have pretty liberal or pretty conservative views. And so they might kind of naturally misinterpret what regular people think, given that they're not really hearing from regular people. And so the point of the True View site that you mentioned is to try to fill this informational hole, to provide for politicians, for journalists, for candidates, for everybody, a lot more data about what people really think on lots of policies and at lots of different political levels.
Yeah, and then let's dig into True Views, a new site. You're part of this effort, and talk to us just a little bit in terms of where you hope this goes and what you hope it does for politicians, for citizens, for journalists, and for just good coverage in general.
Yeah, so the hope is that all sorts of actors in the political world will start to refer to True Views whenever there's a public policy debate about some issue. You know, when abortion, when taxes, when immigration is being discussed, everyone should want to know, well, what do people in my district, in my town, in my county, in my state, what do they think about that? I don't think that public opinion is or should be the only driver of what politicians do or what policies get enacted. But almost everyone agrees that it should be part of the conversation. And so True Views enables it to become part of the conversation. And so, of course, everything hinges on awareness of this data, penetration of this data. It's no use to have True Views if nobody knows about it. So, part of why I'm here today, part of why I wrote the column for The Hill, is just to try to spread awareness of this new tool.
Yeah, it is a great tool, and it leads to something you noted in your piece, referring back to some immigration scholars in the American kaleidoscope. I love that whole framing that it's not just red states and blue states, red districts, blue districts, liberal, conservative, but there is much more of a kaleidoscope that we all would be wise to look at all of the nooks and crannies and the nuances, if again, especially for elected officials, so that they can truly represent those that elected them.
Yeah, what kind of surprised me initially, but now kind of delights me with True Views, is when you look at the spatial patterns of public opinion, you don't just see red and blue states. You don't even just see blue cities and red exurvia. You see checkerboards. You see all kinds of interesting variation. And so it's given me a new appreciation of how complicated our country is. And it doesn't just boil down to familiar red and blue cleavages. And so I've really enjoyed learning that about public opinion from the data and the mapping that the True Views makes available.
Wonderful. And Professor, before I let you go, give us just one thing you think is a little under the radar that you've seen as you've gone through this, as you've started to move this effort forward. What has surprised you? What have you learned? What do you hope people will do different or think different as a result?
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of moderation out there. That's one takeaway. There, on many public policy issues, there are a lot of moderates. There are also a lot of issues that the public is not that divided over. So True Views captures something like 30 or 40 different issues, and many of them are issues where most Americans take what might be called a liberal position or what might be called a conservative position. We don't always have the country split 50-50 with a lot of liberals on one side and a lot of conservatives on the other side. So it just goes again to how once you start digging into public opinion, you see patterns, you see complexity that go beyond the headlines on how divided we are now.
I love this, and this is an important space. Go check this out. TrueViews.org is the website, TrueViews.org. And Professor Stephanopoulos, we appreciate you joining us. This is an important part of getting to the better conversation, the higher level conversation that can help us move the country forward in a much, much better way. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It was my pleasure.
All right, that's Professor Nicholas Stephanopoulos. He's the Kirtland and Ellis Professor of Law at Harvard Law School, member of the academic team behind True Views. And again, you can go check that out at trueviews.org, trueviews.org. And you can also check out his piece at thehill.com today, because this really gets to the heart of a lot of the misperceptions out there. It's really solving one of the pieces of the polarization puzzle, and that is that we're not that divided. We're not nearly as divided as a lot of folks in power want us to believe. And part of the way to get past that, one of the keys in that polarization, depolarization equation, is that we have to get politicians better data to find out what's really going on, that it is a kaleidoscope, that it's not just red and blue, and it's not just a blue county or a red county or a district or even a state, but there's a kaleidoscope within that wise leaders and elected officials would really look at. If their job is to represent the people of that district or of that state, they better know and have a better sense of what the people actually think about the important issues of our time. And it's a lot less polarized than we think because, again, if our politicians are only hearing from the loud and angry, from whatever side of whatever issue, That's never going to get us to the better space for the better conversation, the better policy that leads us towards a better nation. All right, we'll step aside for one last break. We'll come back with some final thoughts on Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Paid for by government. Did you hear? A secret hoard of 1932 $10 gold Indian coins have been found. These gorgeous 1932 gold coins are as bright and shiny as the day they were struck, and less than 200 of these gold coins are available. Coin experts are calling the secret U.S. gold coin discovery a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and you can own a piece of the hoard. When you call, you are guaranteed a 1932 dated gold coin featuring Lady Liberty with an Indian war headdress and a majestic eagle. With limited availability, you must call now. These 1932 dated gold coins are still in uncirculated condition with brilliant luster. That is 92 years of history you can hold in your hand. To learn more, call 1-800-495-6468. Call now and you'll receive a free bonus over a $55 value free with every order. Call 1-800-495-6468 now to secure your 1932 $10 gold Indian coins before they sell out. Don't wait. You must act fast. Call now.
Our home's been due for a little TLC for a while now.
So when we heard Cyprus Credit Union was offering a home equity line of credit at just 6.49% APR for the first 6 months, you better believe we jumped on it.
It's just what we've needed to renovate the living room.
And the kitchen.
And definitely the man cave.
For a limited time, get a HELOC at 6.49% APR. Learn more at cypruscu.com. Cyprus Credit Union. Your future is our future. Federally insured by NCUA. Equal housing lender. NMLS number 666254.
This Friday from 10 to 1, the movie show comes to Sound Sleep Medical. But first, take the time to learn about a better night's rest. Sound Sleep Medical delivers oral appliance therapy that treats sleep apnea without the use of CPAP machines. They're professionally fit, warranted, and covered by most major medical insurance. In the days of a poor night's sleep, Sound Sleep Medical will help. Call Sound Sleep Medical at 801-716-8672 for details. Sound Sleep Medical.
Getting help with plumbing repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
You know, it's hard to believe that Dee and I have now been living in our new house for about 9 years now. You know, the thing that has really surprised me is how many appliances we have had to have work on and even replace. You know, the one that we haven't replaced, haven't done any work on at all, have not had a minute's trouble with, it's the Connecticut soft water system. And it's so interesting because when we were building the home, the builder said, okay, well, what do you want for a water softener? And I just interrupted. I said, wait, we're going to go with Connecticut. And they just smiled at me like, yeah, we know about Connecticut. Never once have we had an issue with our Connecticut soft water system, not only in our new home, but in our previous home as well. It just sits there in the basement, does its job, does it so much more efficiently than any other soft water system out there on the market today. Why don't you give them a call, 801-576-8600, or go to softwaterutah.com.
Hey BYU football fans, this is Mitch Harper. Another BYU football game week is here as the Cougars return to the road to take on the Baylor Bears. And to get ready for the Big 12 battle on the Brazos River, visit your local Macy's grocery store for all of your game day needs. We've got great prices on all of your favorite game day items like burger patties, made fresh dips, and more. And did you know your favorite tailgate foods are also now offered through Macy's Catering? They offer a wide variety of catering platters from smoked meats to wings and even desserts. Catering is available to order online or in store. So whether you're having a small or large party, Macy's has you covered. Never miss a deal when you sign up for the Macy's Rewards program and emails so you can get the ads sent straight to your inbox each week.
Hi, this is BYU captain and defensive end Tyler Batty. It's football season again. Make sure to shop your local Macy's grocery stores for all your favorite tailgate foods.
Get game day ready with Macy's. Happy shopping.
Our home's been due for a little TLC for a while now.
So when we heard Cyprus Credit Union was offering a home equity line of credit at just 6.49% APR for the first 6 months, you better believe we jumped on it.
It's just what we've needed to renovate the living room.
And the kitchen.
And definitely the man cave.
For a limited time, get a HELOC at 6.49% APR. Learn more at cypruscu.com. Cyprus Credit Union. Your future is our future. Federally insured by NCUA. Equal housing lender. NMLS number 666254.
Tim and Amanda.
One of the big differences, I think, between reading a story online and hearing it from us, Tim, is that, you and I are allowed to share a reaction. We need to be able to say, what in the world were they thinking? So that people listening will know. We feel it too. When we read a story that sounds ridiculous, we're right with you. It sounds ridiculous.
Well, we get caught up, I'm sure just like our listeners do sometimes, in death scrolling on social media. And fact-checking it on your own is tough. The great thing about tuning in every morning and starting your morning with us on KSL is you can count on the fact that when that information comes out of the radio in your direction, it comes from reliable sources.
It's already been fact-checked.
Right. And that's not always easy when you're getting it online. Finding who wrote it, when was it written, has it been updated with the current facts of the day that change sometimes minute to minute, not just day to day.
Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9 on KSL News Radio.
Transform your old, outdated kitchen with Half Price Granite. For a limited time, Half Price Granite is offering special pricing starting at $25 per square foot installed. That's lower than most big box stores. These prices are some of the lowest around. Granite, quartz, marble, and quartzite, all starting at $25 per square foot installed. Call 801-486-1700 or visit halfpricegranite.com. Half Price Granite, affordable luxury.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. At 4 in the morning, my phone rang. They said, "I regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action." Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. I was doing school full-time, and I was also then caring for Victor. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just didn't want to forget that I also had goals and that I also had a life. What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved one.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, residents of the Florida Gulf Coast moving inland ahead of Hurricane Helene. Second, people in costume descending on the Salt Palace as FanX begins. And third, we can expect more big booms from Tooele Army Depot today. 90 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today. As always, I am Boyd Matheson, and as we round out the program today, of course, if you missed anything along the way today, you just want to go to kslpodcast.com, click on Inside Sources. You can go to any of the segments, any of our guests that we featured on the program today. You can go right there, listen to that, and rethink and re-listen and think again about what you thought you heard, and maybe pick up a few more things along the way. I often do that with our guests. They're so smart. They have such great insight, so many wonderful nuances that help us connect the dots and make the news make sense and help us to have the confidence to have crucial conversations in our homes, in our community. And today's one of those days where there's a lot going on. It's sort of disaster day. And we do want to be very mindful and stay tuned with Jeff Kaplan throughout the afternoon as Hurricane Helene works its way towards the Florida coast. And that is a major disaster and a lot of things going on there already. Things are picking up, and we're watching all of that play out on the screen right now. There's some other disasters going on in the day that are more man-made than they are natural disaster. Of course, we talked earlier in the show about New York Mayor Eric Adams, formally indicted. Again, the charges are wide-ranging: bribery, wire fraud, illegal campaign contributions and donations from foreign actors. It's a long list, but it's a man-made disaster, and it's usually those come because people get numb. It's the numbing of conscience. I'll never forget when we held an event in the Museum in Washington, D.C. a few years back, and we were talking about Watergate. And it was the anniversary of Watergate. We were looking at the lessons from Watergate. We had Bob Woodward, of course, who was one of the journalists in the middle of uncovering all of the things around Watergate. We had D. Todd Christofferson, who was a law clerk at that time to Judge Sirica in that case. Listen to those Watergate tapes. We had Scott Dimick from Pew Research talking about integrity and trust. And as we went through that whole conversation and what happened, how was it that a president and those around the president got to the point where all of that became okay? And I'll never forget Elder D. Todd Christofferson of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, again, who was a law clerk to Judge Sirica, said it was the numbing of conscience, that things had just continued to be okay and passed along, and before long, you find yourself in really bad spaces. And we talked about this at the beginning of the show today. And I always go back to just a tiny little book printed in 1902, The Power of Truth by William George Jordan. And he talks about these are man-made disasters. But he talked about how powerful it was that truth can stand alone, that truth doesn't need a chaperone or an escort. But then I love this. Lies are cowardly, fearsome things that must travel in battalions. They're like a lot of drunken men, one vainly seeking to support another. And how often do we see that numbing of conscience, that lapse in integrity, and then suddenly you've got a group around you that are either telling you what you want to hear or not saying the truth, and so everybody goes along to get along, and suddenly we have a disaster. And we have a lot of these disasters. And they usually begin with ignoring the truth or not having the character to say the truth. And so we buy into these lies, these cowardly, fearsome things that travel around in battalions. And we have to get back to recognizing what is that and how does that happen? We've got other natural disasters. We've got a tsunami of spending going on in our nation's capital with no end in sight. And we always like to reward good behavior. We always try not to reward bad behavior. And so in a rewarding good behavior moment, Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky put forward, as he does every year, it started as a penny plan. Now it's the 6 penny plan, but it would balance the books in 6 years. And it just requires a little bit of discipline. But it exposes this tsunami of spending, this addiction to spending that we have in Washington that is leading us to some bad places because the math always wins and there are absolutely predictable consequences coming. And that's a disaster. And it's a man-made disaster. Hurricanes we can deal with. Floods we can deal with. Earthquakes we can deal with. The American people know how to rise up in the face of that kind of challenge. No problem. What do you need? Sandbags? You need someone to take away tree limbs. You need someone to bring in food for those that are working on power lines. No problem, no problem, no problem. Rebuild the city, rebuild the homes, rebuild the schools. No problem. We can do all of that. And yet when it comes to man-made disasters, whether it's the lapse of integrity, the loss of accountability and transparency, or if it's this ultimate in taxation without representation, this spending into infinity for people to pay back that aren't even born yet. Their parents haven't even met yet. They haven't even got on a first date yet, and they're going to be holding the bag because of the absolute predictability of consequences. That is a man-made, absolutely preventable disaster. And the solution is not money. That's not the answer. The answer is leadership. It's always a leadership. When people tell me there's a money problem or a resource problem in an organization, I would say, no, what you actually have is a leadership problem, because a leader would figure that out. A leader would get people to rally to the cause. A leader would show, here's the way up, here's the way out. It's a leadership issue, and we got to get back to leadership in this country. That wraps it up for us on Inside Sources today here on KSL News Radio. I'm Boyd Matheson. Thanks for joining us. And as always, as you go out into the world today, make sure you do your part. Make sure you see something that inspires, say something that uplifts, and do something that makes a difference.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
From the KSL Common Spirit Health Studios, this is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Good afternoon, 3 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Jeff Kaplan. 88 degrees and sunshine, KSL's top story. A potentially catastrophic hurricane is heading right toward Florida. Looks like it's going to hit where the Panhandle meets the rest of the state. And at this moment, some fearless Utahns are on their way to help.
5 Utahns are heading to the front line to help with what's expected to be potentially unsurvivable conditions. The Utah Red Cross selected the skilled volunteers who specialize in disaster relief. Executive Director of Salt Lake Chapter Jeremiah LaFranca pulled back the curtain to share what it's like for them with boots on the ground in Florida.
They kind of receive an assignment when they get there, whether they're going to be working a shelter, the hurricane goes through. We have people that do damage assessment, people that work with food vendors and making sure they're pinning up food.
These volunteers are your neighbors coming from communities like Harriman, Ogden, Salt Lake, American Fork, and Moab. The Red Cross will also send support vehicles and supplies to support those people in need. Eric Cabrera, KSL News Radio.
We have more on just how strong Hurricane Helene has become. Maria Chaleos is live at the KSL National News Desk.
Jeff, Hurricane Helene is moving up Florida's Gulf Coast as a Category 3 storm. The storm packing winds of at least 120 miles per hour. It's expected to make landfall tonight in the Big Bend region. Tampa resident Rob Pokrifke says if conditions rapidly deteriorate, it might be safest to stay put.
You don't want to just go driving around. You never know where it's going to head. So I think we would just hunker down and ride it out.
The pounding rain now flooding cities in the hurricane's path. Ukrainian President Zelensky is at the White House to meet with President Biden.
To all American people, together we have to win, and we will win.
President Biden also announcing a new $2.4 billion package of security assistance. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will continue striking Hezbollah with full force, dimming hopes for a ceasefire. Netanyahu spoke as he landed in New York to attend the annual UN General Assembly meeting. Hundreds have been killed in Lebanon this week as Israel dramatically escalated strikes.